The problem is most people don't realize this, is that the well-off get most of the goodies. You look at so many things, or you look at streets in poor neighborhoods or park districts in poor neighborhoods versus well-off neighborhoods. That is the major challenge. And I do believe there's a better way than what we've done. You want good businesses. You want a nice downtown. You want attractive things. You want to attract all these young people that all the big cities are fighting for. But there ought to be a better way to balance that with not such blatant ignoring of all these other problems we just talked about. That's partly Chicago, the old history, the machine, the kind of mayors we've had since Harold, meaning Daley and Rahm, that have been kind of top-down, please the wealthy. The money comes back in campaign contributions. It's interesting, Ken Griffin, the richest person in the state, just gave $1 million to Bill Daley, okay? Now, again, I don't want to make any assumptions there, but the question of, since this guy was one of two major backers of Rauner, that doesn't mean he's a bad guy. It just means, what is he thinking Daley will do? And I'm not accusing Daley. I'm just saying, describe what I just did is what we need to change in Chicago. And this is not class warfare. It does not mean that we got to take everything from the well-off. No, it just means we're fair about our resources, which we aren't now. Okay? But there's a lot of structural problems in the changes. The so-called aldermanic prerogative. If this notion of aldermanic prerogative, which came out of zoning, let me be the boss there, which has led to so much corruption and so many aldermen going to jail over zoning deals. Dealing with these issues are not just we're going to change our minds. It's all these other structural things, and that's why history is important. The old machine built up a system that was inherently conservative, that we reward the few at the cost of the many.
You're listening to Chicagoland on UC3P. We'll be right back with more of our interview with David Orr. Stay tuned.
Hey UC3P listeners, I'm Thomas.
And I'm Nick.
In the United States, public faith in the military remains sky high, while trust in other government institutions sinks to an all-time low.
At the same time, fewer than 1% of Americans will ever serve in the armed forces, and the cultural divide between active duty troops and the civilian population continues to widen.
UC3P presents a new series, Thank You for Your Service, where we take a deep dive into the complex world of civil-military affairs.
We'll address the politicization of the military, defense policy in the news, and the importance of staying informed in a democracy.
Join us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts as we explore how our professional military institution relates to the society it serves.
You want me to talk about some of the candidates?
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts on some of the strengths of the
Well, first
the
of
field.
all, remember, I start from a position, I'm always looking to find ways to make our election system more fair. And we're a long way from it because money is still destroying our democracy fairly quickly, and it's the same thing happening here. There's a reason why the top 3 or 4 candidates, if you go by polls, are those top 3 or 4 candidates. It's not just that, Bill Daley, a well-known name. It's not just Susan Mendoza, a well-known name, Tony Prickle, well-known names. It's because they're the ones that spent the money on ads. Mm-hmm. You could have Attila the Hun, and he'll be right up there if he had the ads right now. Okay, so that's number one, and that's part of the broken system.
Do you feel that those polls are reflecting what voter behavior is actually going to look like, though?
Well, we don't know. It's in this sense, it is. It's saying they're not happy with the field in general. Okay, now it doesn't mean there are a number of people that really like Willie Wilson. Not necessarily because maybe Willie would make the best mayor, but like Willie Wilson because he has for years, not just recently, he has given money to poor people to help them with their tax problem. Okay, That's not just, so there's people care about these individual candidates. Okay, but I'm saying you start with the broken political system and the broken financial system, and so it explains kind of power. If you start talking about the skills, yes, and one of your questions, which you didn't ask yet, but the relationship to the old machine. Part of it, all the major candidates are, up to their neck with the old machine, but they all trying to hide it and pretend. And even one of the ones who's not a major candidate, Paul Vallis, who was slamming the other ones for their machine tactics, well, he was top dog with Daley. Did he forget all those years? I'm not condemning him. He's a smart guy, okay? But they're all fleeing from this machine that I've been critical of for all these years, okay, and trying to change their stripes, so to speak. Lori Lightfoot might be the exception there, and she's trying to take advantage of it. She's just, she's very well qualified. Not all these people are well qualified. She's very well qualified. The question is, where does she get the money, the name recognition to compete? So, like I say, a lot of people just don't know what to do. Tony Preckwinkle, it's kind of a funny situation with Tony. There's a strong labor support, at least from some labor, not very strong, ironically, in the black community, and not very popular. I mean, her numbers are not good in the sense of more people dislike her than like her, but she's still one of the leaders. Everyone's playing this way. Certainly there's people saying, well, I don't care that much about Tony, but I better support her because I don't want Daley or I don't want Mendoza, and they're all playing that game. Okay, so Tony has her strengths, but she's had a lot of problems in the last, couple of years, so to speak. Mendoza, I don't condemn her because she came right out of the old right-wing machine. I mean, she was a product of that, and she was a young Latina, and let's get her face out there, and they did the bills. So, she still has grown, but I don't think she's run a very effective campaign yet.
Her poll numbers have been going up, if I'm not mistaken.
I don't even know the latest, okay, because I'm in another town, but I don't know if there's been any good polls. There's polls that each individual group puts out, and they only put out the parts that help them. But so it's not just the big three, we say Daley, Mendoza, and Tony Preckwinkle, but you got Chico. Now, again, Chico's up there because of the money. He's had ads and probably better ads than most of them. So that's kind of a surprise, I think. Chico also, remember, he was chief of staff to Ed Burke for I don't know how many years, okay? And again, that doesn't condemn him. You can work for people that we don't respect right now, and that doesn't mean you're a crook or something. And then there's other candidates that have talent, but they're hard to get a play.
We talked about Bill Daley a little bit, and he was recently endorsed by the Chicago Tribune. I know you've mentioned that these candidates are maybe getting traction because they have the most money, but do you think that there is something about Daley being a Daley, having had, his brother and father together, combined 40 years of time in City Hall? Why do you think Chicago's might still be drawn to this family, and do you think that there's actually any promise with another Daley mayor?
Well, there's a lot of things. Remember, a lot of people respected Rich Daley, even if they said, he stayed too long, he almost bankrupted the city, but they liked him better than Rahm. Of course, it made Rahm very angry because Rahm was smart, worked hard, did some good things, but his style really ticked off a lot of people. And also, when there's so much, chaos and confusion, and you got all this stuff going on, meaning schools being closed, particularly in poor neighborhoods, the incredible problems with police abuse, and every day a new story. And it doesn't just affect the African-American community, it kind of affects everybody. When you have all these things happening, people, sometimes they want something tried and true. Daley's, of course, challenge is to what extent, because he's also run as a progressive, can he do things, frankly, different than his, no offense, but old man Daley was an incredible racist guy. And he did some terrible things in office, particularly to the black community. And so the question is, and Rich spent it was Rich with the parking meter deal where the public might have lost $2 billion. It's amazing. There's other people would never be forgiven for stuff like that. So he's got both. He's got that thing around his neck, but he's also, I think is the way you raise the question, is that, I was comfortable with the Daley, and some people thought we were doing okay. Rahm is probably sitting there thinking, wait a second, because if young Daley had spent more money helping with the pensions, I wouldn't have the financial crisis and have to raise taxes by $600 million, because otherwise I would have run again. And I think he would have run again, but he knew he'd lose. So again, who knows? But remember, no offense to the Tribune. They do a lot of good stuff, but the Tribune editorial board is very, very conservative. So if you have a little bit of progressivism in you, look out. You're not going to be their favorite.
So we'd like to go back and focus a little bit more on aldermanic races. Sure. And you talked a little bit about the spending power that aldermen have and how it's a bit imbalanced across the city. Can you tell listeners why they should care about who their alderman is?
The more people understand about government and how, particularly if you're just middle class or average in terms of maybe your income and wanting to do better, I'm simplifying, of course. The bottom line is the very wealthy and powerful want you to hate government. They want you to hate government, to blame government, so they can cut back all the spending, except for themselves. They always want the money, but they want to cut back all the spending for the social programs. I mean, it's almost that simple. Whereas those people who promote government as a vehicle to help the larger public interest, the body politic, schools better, roads better, people getting jobs, caring for people when they have mental issues and so forth, then you want a robust government. Folks here in Chicago are a little more difficult because they've seen the abuses of the big government, meaning the machine. See what I mean? I try to look at this as there's got to be a third way. I don't want right-wing republicanism that wants to starve government and give all the money to the military and private corporations. But I don't want the machine model, which does care for some people, but has corruption, abuse, and basically ends up helping the few anyway. I think there's a third way, and I think that's what most people want nowadays. So a third way meaning people that are independent enough. We need a real city council. Just think if we had more than Scott Wagasback on that parking meter deal. Just think if you don't have to have 50, you don't have to have 26. You might have 6. 6 articulate aldermen say, wait a second, what about this, what about this? Can make a world of difference. And just think about that. We lost a couple $1 billion. Or people would speak up right now about the TIF funds. We've lost so much there.
Was Scott Wagasback, was he the one council member to vote against the parking meter deal?
Others felt bad, but remember when you have too many scoundrels and or enablers, and not everybody is, of course, what happens is they pull their little tricks. We have to do this immediately. They give you 700 pages Friday night. We're going to vote Monday. I mean, that stuff should never happen. Okay, but they pull those kind of tricks, and then they get all their allies to make the calls and scare people. And they're also very good at compromise, giving you little teeny things for your ward, like the crumbs, to make you be able to say to your public, well, I went along. Most people felt rushed, but we didn't have enough power to say, wait a second, give us more time. Or the elected officials didn't have enough theater in them. Part of the problem with elected officials, they need to understand, you can't always play by their rules because their rules are stacked. Okay, you need to do things. You know, you have your own city council meeting. You go to the chamber, have your own meeting, and you scream and shout about things, and you alert the public, and you get the media as a friend here, because you need to beat back these schemes because it doesn't necessarily hurt the aldermen. They get big salaries. It hurts average people. They're paying hundreds of millions of dollars more in taxes than they should be.
You did mention that with so many candidates running that, I don't know, there's not a lot of conviction amongst voters about who they want to vote for. I think I've definitely seen a lot of people having a lot of indecisive moments when they're trying to figure out, you know, who's going to be the right candidate. Why is it important for Chicagoans to vote in this election? And with so many candidates running, how can voters go about selecting a candidate who will truly align with their values? And then I think on top of that, do you think it's important for voters to think about voting strategically?
It's critical, like I say, because bad government, let's put it like that, bad government really hurts. Good government helps. I mean, no, I'm sorry if I'm bragging a little bit here, but all the things we did to make it easier to vote, that's good, okay? Or if you look at Barrios, all the bad things he did and the terrible way he handled the assessor's office, and poor people got hit hard. I mean, so there's good and bad government, and it makes a difference. And we're on the cusp right now of making some significant changes. There is a mood exemplified by the gubernatorial candidates, the mayoral candidates, all talking a progressive game, even if they don't mean it, but they're talking it. So there's a real opportunity to make change, and to make change, which means if we spend the money more wisely, if we do that, that means the schools won't be as bad. That means poor neighborhoods are going to get better street repaving and other kinds of things. There's so many things that can be done because other cities are doing them. Okay, all across this country, other cities have less problems than we do because they're facing them better. So there is an important reason to run, and strategically, it's hard sometimes because no one has time to get to know these people very well. And they all talk a big game. I talk a big game. So, so how do they decide? In most cases, they rely on other people they know and respect. But there's other places they can go. People are always looking. That's why I'll mention the Lincoln Yards. I'll mention things about TIF money.